What's up, people? I'm Shaggy. I'm a hippie, kind of opinionated, maybe not that much. But today, this is part 17 of what I hope is a never ending series, Immortality, of reviews and rankings of the Grateful Dead's Dave's Picks, an archival concert release series, much like their Dick's Picks, but now it's Dave doing the picking. And this is number 17. I'm going to review 17, and then I'm going to show you where I think 17 falls in my estimation according to the other 16. Then I'll do 18 and include that and keep on going till we reach the end. This is another complete show from 1974, July 19th in Fresno, California, which back when I was living in California, Fresno was bowling alleys and meth. I don't know if that's still the case. Sorry to bad Matthew Fresno if that's different, but that's my memory of visiting Fresno. Bowling alleys and meth. So anyways, sorry. Don't mean to bash you. Central Valley is a rough place in California though. So, but yeah, I'm a huge, huge fan of 1974. That is probably my favorite year of the Dead. I love the way the band sounds in 74. Something about Bill's drumming in particular and the way it's mic'd or just the way it sounds. I think the instruments all kind of occupy their own space in the mixes in a way that maybe they don't do in other years. I just love this year, love the set list from the year, love some of my favorite, all-time favorite shows are from this year. But this is a weird pick. It is a 3 CD release. It is only the show, the complete show. There's no bonus disc. And I think if you were to like on the spectrum of grateful people who don't really know the Grateful Dead but want to get into it, and then people who go to shows and have tape collections and can tell you how many times they played Birdsong between like 73 and 80, like all those like hardcore. The farther you are on the hardcore spectrum, I think the more you can find enjoyment out of the show, because while I think it is a good show, at times a great show, there are times when it feels like the Dead are relentlessly searching for something they don't ever find, and that search is interesting, and that like taking chances improv wise is interesting. And as a Dead fan, I like to hear these sort of warts and all performances. But it's not a show. This is not a release or a show I go back to all that often, just because those sort of singular jams that will like draw me towards other shows are not here. There are some great moments, two in particular that I think are absolutely fantastic and I think are worth checking out if you have the time or inclination. But for the most part, this is a 74 show that I think kind of falls to the back of the pack. And I'm it's just interesting that this was released. But anyways, again, it's 3 discs. So this is the era. Mickey is not in the era. You have Keith and Donna both playing. You know, Pigpen is long gone. The mix on this release is pretty good. It's kind of rocky at first, but eventually sort of course corrects as as the show goes on. You got some really nice moments where Phil steps up, particularly in the playing the band, in the Weather Report suite, which kind of evolves into a Spanish jam, has some good Phil, some really good Keith moments throughout. Jerry is a little hit and miss. There's a lot of moments where he kind of just steps back and seems to let everybody else kind of take the reins, which I'm okay with. And then there are moments where Jerry just steps up and like delivers like a ferocity that you want out of a Jerry. Yeah. So anyways, 3 discs. The first disc is the first set with one more song that is on disc 2. And it's your typical 74 first set. I think if there's one song that kind of stands out, there's a me and Bobby McGee towards the latter half of the set, which is pretty interesting. But it's just your pretty standard, kind of high energy, solid performances of a pretty routine set list. Opens with a Bertha, get a Mexicali Blues, a Deal. So we're early in the Deal. We've not yet have these really, really long jams at the end. You know, it's just kind of a short run through of the song. Beat It On Down the Line, always up for that. A Road Jimmy, The Nice Me and My Bobby McGee. And then the highlight of the first set is the Scarlet Begonias, mainly because when they hit that jam in Scarlet Begonias, Jerry is just off. Like he is just aggressively playing. That sort of Caribbean feel, that sort of either the Caribbean feel that would kind of dominate later in the 70s and 80s, or that sort of really kind of almost a little more out there, kind of ecstatic exploratory vibe that some of these Scarlets have, a more kind of cleaner, open space. It's not there. It's just Jerry, pedal to the metal, kind of attacking it with the ferocity that a lot of Scarlets from this era just don't have. I mean, it almost sounds like it's not a Jerry solo. It's like a normal rock guitar player playing like a solo in like a song. It is a very interesting vibe. And the band responds and they go with Jerry, and you know, it's not like he's taken off and he's leaving them behind. They're with him. But it's an energy and just sort of, I want to say ferocity, though it's not like you're like completely chaotic, like tiger madness that Jerry would do, but it has an edge to it and a drive and a bite that a lot of Scarlets don't. And I think it's easily, even with a 30-minute playing in the band, that is going to close the set. I think it's the highlight of the first set. And so that's toward the latter half of the first disc. And then you get an El Paso and a Tennessee Jet. Tennessee Jet is always good. The actual song itself almost sounds like the lyrics, the song part of it is kind of like, I think Jerry comes in way early, if I'm not mistaken. It's like they open up with like a dun 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 dun, and then he immediately goes into the lyrics instead of like playing that riff again and kind of setting the vibe. It's a weird Tennessee Jet. But again, as with almost every Tennessee Jet, once you get to the solo, like you don't care what happened before then because the solo kind of redeems it all. So that's the first set. A nice first set, in no way bad. Highlight is definitely Scarlet Begonias. Nice Me and My Bobby McGee. I like the Tennessee Jet. Get on to disc 2. You get the end of the first set with a 30-minute playing in the band. And this playing in the band, I was trying to find out like what the right analogy is, and I'm going with this one. It's a basketball one. If you're not a basketball fan, I think you'll be able to understand what I'm going for. So there are times when your team's playing, my team, the Spurs, and like for some reason, things just aren't clicking for like the first 5 or 6 minutes. And before you know it, you're in a 12, 15-point hole. Other teams got this double-digit lead on you. You finally start to figure out what's going on. You start to get some stops. You start to get some scores. Before you know it, it's down to like 3, maybe even 2 points. You're like within a basket. But because you've spent so much effort to get to that point, the other team then goes on like a 6 or 7 point run. Before you know it, it's back up to 10. You got to climb back up. You get it down to 2 or 3. They hit a couple threes, you're down by 8 again. And it's just this nonstop, almost Sisyphus pushing like the boulder up the hill, where every time you reach the top, it just comes back down and you got to start all over again. And this playing almost sounds like over the course of like the 30 minutes, it seems like there's 10 or 11 different musical ideas that the band is trying to like gel around. Like early on, Phil's driving it. Then Jerry kind of steps up and maybe tries to take over. Then Keith has a really nice moment where it seems like both Phil and Jerry are like, all right, Keith, you got any ideas? Because whatever we're throwing out there is just not working. And there are a lot of dead jams where that's the case, where like over the course of 20 to 25 minutes, they're all over the map. But there's a momentum behind that, like exploratory action. So even though you have this musical idea that you abandoned, the energy is pushing you to this other. And so it doesn't feel like you're starting over as much as you're just like changing lanes or maybe taking a different road. This playing is almost like, we got an idea for a minute or two. Nah, it just didn't work. Let's kind of scrap it, bring the energy down, and let somebody else take the lead. Oh, that didn't work. Scrap it, bring it down, let somebody else take the lead. And it almost feels like for the entire like 30 minutes, it's just like, you got an idea, Phil? It didn't work. Keith, Jerry. And then eventually they kind of go into a very deep space part, and it really starts to gel with about 5 or 6 minutes left when Jerry teases the reprise, and you realize they're going to go back into the reprise, and they kind of toy with that idea for like a minute or two. That's like the best energy of the song, easily. Then they jump into the reprise, and the energy is strong, and they kind of jam out for a little while before they end it. But it's a frustrating listen, because there are so many moments where you're like, oh, go with this, run with this. This is the idea. This is going to be good. And then it just kind of crumbles apart and they have to start over. Maybe like you're building a house of cards and every time you get to the second level, it just falls apart and they kind of start over again. But that's the way the playing leaves me. It is playing is the one song I think I will say this. I want to hear every single playing in the band they've ever played. To me, that's the most interesting thing they've ever done is that song. And I just love, how they take one basic song and they go so many different places. I'm glad I've heard this one. I like listening to this. I go back and revisit it. But every time I do, I'm like, failed opportunity here. Like, where's Jerry? Why did he step out? Or where's Phil? All of a sudden he's gone. Why did Keith not push this more? So yeah, that's the way this playing in the band makes me feel. 30 minutes. I think, again, the more you are on the spectrum of being a hardcore Dead fan, the more you will enjoy this. But other than that, I don't think this is one of those that's going to convince somebody that the Dead is like a rabbit hole they should go down. But I enjoy it. Then you get 15 minutes of Phil Lesh and Ned Lagan's Sea Stones, which is like a very ambient with like some deep, dark bass tones and like some electronic noises, and then just kind of playing around with sort of musical ideas, a very sort of aural landscape type thing. Not the most engaging Sea Stones. I think the short snippets that was released on Dave's Picks, right? It's 12, right? Yeah, the one on Dick's Picks 12, which is I think an edited, maybe slightly shorter version, is better than the 15 minutes on here. But if you're into that kind of weird out there ambient, yeah, there's only 5 minutes of this. If you're into that sort of weird experimental kind of exploratory noise making music, you got 15 minutes of it here. Kind of interesting. That Dick's Picks 12 is one of my favorite Dick's Picks. And then you go, and then that stops, and then we go on to the second set. You get 4 songs in the second set to finish outside disc 2. Get a Brown Eyed Women as an opener, interesting choice. A Me and My Uncle, It Must Have Been the Roses, which I'm always here for, and a pretty nice Jackstraw. But nothing that I would say is a must hear. Disc 3, easily the highlight of this disc, I would say by far. I just got a severe weather alert for my neighborhood. So disc 3 opens up with a really, really sloppily performed He's Gone. I think there's a major like musical mistake. I think they sing the bridge. They come into the bridge early or come out of it early. There's some sloppy playing. It's not the most inspired actual song performance, but the end jam is really good. Kind of redeems it. You can suffer through like the actual song, like the jam that ends it is one of those like, okay, yeah, this is why I sit through a He's Gone for this kind of jam. Again, not the best He's Gone jam ever, but it's a pretty good He's Gone jam. That goes into a US Blues. Big fan of US Blues when it's not in an encore spot. So pretty nice, but it's still a US Blues. After the US Blues, we get a Weather Report suite. Always here for Weather Report suite. Really, really nice jam at the end of the Weather Report suite. But the jam definitely kind of feels like an atypical Weather Report suite. It seems to be touching into almost some Dark Star energy or some of like a darker playing in the band type energy, which is normally not where a Weather Report suite goes. So it almost feels like whatever ideas they wanted to play and playing in the band, like, hey, I have an idea. It would have worked back in playing, but let's throw it in here. So they kind of mess with a kind of a different style of jamming, a little more of that kind of playing in the band, Dark Star, just kind of out there intensity. And that goes into a Spanish jam. And you can hear the Spanish jam coming, then they eventually commit to it. And it's a weird Spanish jam. Like, it's definitely not one of my favorite Spanish jams. It almost seems to like linger too long, like they want it to be more than it is and they're not willing to give up on it, so they just kind of stick with it for maybe longer than they should. Phil is like a lot more dominant than he normally is. Bob sounds fantastic, but it's a weird little Spanish jam. I don't know. It leaves me wanting to go listen to other better Spanish jams, but at the same time, I'm glad they did it. I'm glad they went there. But ultimately, I think it's, again, like playing in the band, like their ambitions were not matched by the execution. They weren't able to actually execute maybe what they envisioned it would sound like. But it's interesting. I don't think it's bad. It just the heights aren't there. What is there, and one of my favorite segues of all time, is the segue into Eyes of the World. It is not one of those stop the jam and jump into Eyes of the World. It is an almost the closest thing you get to an Eyes of the World sort of Scarlet Fire jam, when like the really good Scarlet Fires, like Phil starts teasing Fire like a minute or two early, and then eventually Bob maybe joins, and then Jerry gets in, and then we're into the fire. This is one of those Eyes where like, oh, they're going to go into Eyes, but they don't right away, and it kind of takes them a while to get around to jumping full into the Eyes, and once they do, it's just like glorious. We're into Eyes. Who doesn't love Eyes? It sounds fantastic. The ending jam is great. It's everything you want out of an Eyes of the World. And that goes into one of the best songs you will ever in your life hear out of an Eyes of the World, a China Doll. And it's just a really good, well-performed China Doll. And then we get one more Saturday night for the encore. So not the best show, but I do think Disc 3 has enough really, really interesting moments to kind of maybe lift this up higher. The He's Gone jam, despite the kind of botched song. U.S. Blues in an atypical non-encore slot. An Always Solid Weather Report suite. An interesting, if not that great, Spanish jam. And what I think is a phenomenal pairing of Eyes of the World, China Doll. Really good, roughly 2/3 of Disc 3 is fantastic. So yeah. Those are my thoughts on this. And I love 74. So, you know, I feel bad not immediately praising this and loving it, but that's where I would put it. As far as where it would go on the list, right there. I'm dropping it way down there at number 12. It's a lot of really, really good shows. And we also have, you know, the number 1 on the list is a 74 show, which I think is fantastic. I think that one at number 7, the July 31st from like, you know, a week and a half later is another really good 74 show. We got some really good a late 73 show at the number 3 spot. So, you know, this is a good list of shows. The only things on this list that I would say are maybe weak are number 16 and 17, maybe number 15. Everything else is pretty strong. So being number 12, you're among some pretty consistently great shows, but definitely the upper echelon is like, you know, that top 5 on this list. But yeah, not a bad show. For 74, maybe a little disappointing to my ears, but I think it's one of those, the more hardcore you are into the Dead, the more I think you can appreciate what they're trying to do on here. But yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. That's it. That's all I got to say about this one. Yeah, comment, subscribe, like, share. If you do listen to this or check it out, love to know what your thoughts are. I do have a couple friends who like this show. I got some people I've known for decades who I used to go on tour with who are kind of following me doing this, and I'm giving them my opinions, you know, before I film these. And one of my friends really, really likes this show much better than I do, and he's not even a 74 fan. So I'm sure there are others out there who disagree with me, but I don't disagree with me. This is where I'm putting it. I'm going to stand by my, and that one after it, the number 13, there's a Montana show after that. Probably the most laid back show they've ever done, but a pretty good laid back show. But anyways, yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching. Peace. Take care, y'all. Be safe. I'm going to go see why I got a severe weather warning, and hopefully I'll be able to make another video someday. All right. Bye, y'all. Peace.